It's Saturday, it's 11 o'clock. It's another Badminton Talk podcast from Dublin, Ireland. My name is John Noble and...
my name is Mark Topping.
Mark, another Saturday, another podcast. How are you?
I'm in great form. My yoga is going brilliantly, John. What about yourself?
Wow, well, I'm starting to get into these 10k runs, so far so good.
Well done, John.
Yeah, so I think we're going to be in COVID for a little while longer, so we got to make the most. So Mark, today we're back to Richard Vaughan, yes?
Yes, indeed. Looking forward to hearing what Richard Vaughan has to say.
Yes, we have part 2 of the Badminton Talk podcast on Richard Vaughan. Richard Vaughan tells us a lot more about the game of badminton and other very interesting parts. So Mark, I think we should go back to the interview we had last month with Richard Vaughan. What do you think?
Absolutely. He's a fascinating man, particularly with... we were talking about the winning mindset, so he's just brilliant advice to listen to Richard.
Yeah, so we will continue on, thanks to, of course, the Q Shuttle. We will go back and listen to A Winning Mindset, as Mark said to, by Richard Vaughan. Let's go. Oh, that's fascinating stuff, Richard. Thank you for that. Mark, I think we have another question to put to Richard, which is slightly changing the topic here, but the theme is still there, but just want to question Richard on something different.
Absolutely. More probably of interest to our Irish listeners, since we're based here in Dublin, and I'm going to take Richard back on a bit of a time walk back to 2011. Richard, you arrived as CEO of Badminton Ireland back in 2011, and you probably took a little time to analyse and look at the structures of Irish badminton. At that time, back in 2011, what were your initial thoughts on Irish badminton and Badminton Ireland in general?
Yeah, no, look, I think the one thing that jumped out was there was plenty of potential and lots of passion. In terms of lots of people playing, lots of good clubs and administrators involved in the game. I guess it was more from the club level up as such that when we were going around the facilities and the ability of clubs to get courts, for example, for any expansion of clubs was a challenge for major events and for courts. For example, for a major Grand Prix, there wasn't the facilities that offered both the courts and the seating capacities and everything else that goes with that type of event to make it a spectacle as such. And I guess they needed a reset on the structures. The coach education framework at that time was only level 1. So again, going back to that vision. There wasn't a level 2, 3, 4. There weren't the structures in place that take a player or a coach kind of all the way through in terms of progression. There were some good things in place, but it wasn't the completed article across a number of the areas. And I guess particularly at that time, they'd been on the back end of the financial crash, so there was very little funding for one-off projects or those extra things. So there was minimal budget across everything as well. So lots of potential and passion, but at that particular point in particular, not the funding or any of the finished articles really across most of the areas. So, but the most encouraging thing was really that potential. If you could put those structures in place and that create that vision, that there would be some good outcomes.
Yeah, and I think Mark and myself have often talked about the sport of badminton, even taking the provinces in Ireland without funding and money. very little can happen, even with a good vision. But as you've said, Richard, a vision is very important. And if we fast forward slightly to, here we are on the Badminton Talk podcast with Richard Vaughan, reached top 10 player in the world. And I think Richard was number 7 was your highest rank. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think it was around 2000, 2002 in that sort of window there. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. That's absolutely amazing. And I would encourage any of our listeners to Google on YouTube Richard Vaughan and see him in action. I'm amazed how fast and ferocious a competitor he was. But if we fast the clock to February 2021, the federation here, the Badminton Federation, is much vastly improved place than it was a decade ago. As you said, Richard, you put in amazing structures when you came in as the new CEO back then. There's now, because of all that's gone by, there's a structure now for young juvenile players to hopefully one day reach higher levels of this game, represent their country abroad, win medals, perhaps one day, who knows, play in an Olympics and maybe take a medal. But let me put a question to you, Richard, in a different way. Where badminton is now is a massive step forward in the right direction. As you said, the strategic vision was there and it's been moved forward. But in order to advance to the next stage, and you're very much in, you worked across, your experiences across lots of different sports bodies, and you're always looking at vision and strategy. And to have you have a much greater depth of the young players competing, like the Danish system, the French system, the Spanish system. What would you do? This is putting you on the spot here. What would you do if you were back in the CEO seat of Badminton Ireland now or next year or whenever? What would the blueprint look like? What would your strategic plan look like? And I know we don't have an awful lot of time, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on that question, and I'm sure our listeners too.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of the structure, from what I understand, that I left is largely there. So it's making sure that those tracks stay in place. The difficulty is the funding. So I think we did an awful lot then with the funding we had, and I think the funding's gone up a little bit, but it's not substantial, because as you get one better player and another one, they all require funding. So without the funding, it's very hard. So if you look at some of those other countries that you mentioned, France, for example, there's been so much funding going in there for 40 years, 50 years. And now they've got a good system and getting good return. But if you were to add up the volume of that funding, it's significant. Spain, the same. They have Olympic training centers that are kind of world class. So yeah, I think from a performance point of view, it'd be a chance to reset what's there, make sure the right people are in the right roles, so that you've got that quality throughout the system, and helping, again, going back to the players, working on those pillars you mentioned and their mindset to make sure that they can maximize what they've got. The institute, the Sport Island, the institute there have kind of progressed the last couple of years.
Yeah. For sure.
So again, trying to maximize things around those physical pillars. Again, take in Denmark or France or Spain. Their support services are really, really world class. So it's very hard without money because you'd have to go out there commercially and get that support. But it's really just making sure each of those pillars is the best quality it can be. And some of that might take money, some of it might be more strategic. I think the biggest piece, so I think we did quite well in the performance space and putting the right structures as such, and we have some really good people. Yeah. So if you look at Irwan Sayers, now the Indonesian head coach for men's singles.
Super.
Ben Cardwell, who was there, so he's head coach in one of the main German provinces for the German national team. Dan has developed and still there, and so I think the people we had then, they were really good and they've really all developed. And it's a pity they didn't all stay in Ireland. Don't get me wrong, but they all had a clear vision and what they wanted to achieve, and they've all maximized themselves. So it's going back to that and making sure you get the maximal effect. I think the one opportunity, and you kind of touched on it, was really be around it. If you could go back in time, or would be putting a blueprint in place for that participation-based kind of membership structures to try and maximize the potential in terms of the number of people playing, and commercializing that in the right way for the sport to make the brand of the sport better.
Like the way GAA football is in Ireland, if you remember. Would that be something on your...
Yeah, exactly. Because I think there is a lot of potential there still, and the performance piece is kind of there. It can be better, don't get me wrong, but it's there. But I think the potential with that participation and connecting with the branches and like having a win-win relationship with the clubs to maximize, what they get would be, I think, the biggest one. And I know the chair when I was at Ronan Rooney, that was his main driver, was really delivering that to that base, your social player. Things like the All Ireland Championships, we tried to put a lot of effort into in terms of structure and the streaming initiative that we started. So I think going back, I think that's where the biggest potential is, trying to improve the efficiencies with the branch, make sure there's more resource and structures in place to help the clubs. As I said, some of them are not so easy, like the infrastructure strategy. There is a lack of courts, actual physical buildings with courts, and that's not cheap. But having things in place and documents and strategies in place in that area, I think, because there are so many people playing in Ireland, and there's some potential to improve the brand in that space and link it to the performance pool.
Yeah, I think the courts, Richard, in the National Indoor Arena is certainly a massive step forward as the new home for the talented badminton players and our junior players, a multi arena. So that's and also, I mean, the Leinster main halls in the north on Baldoyle, the north side of Dublin, and in turn they're still there. But you're kind of when you alluded to Ronan there, Rooney, his mindset was like you have the vital few versus the trivial many, and I don't mean that in any what you call reduced way. The trivial many in every sport are the most important. It's kind of the other way around. So if you were, I'm throwing in a question here before, maybe Mark will throw in a question too, Richard, because it's very interesting. If you were one of those players in that structure at the moment, and you have a system like it's in Ireland, do you have to go, in your own opinion, do you have to move outside the country if you really want to be a top 20, 30 player in the world?
Oh, look, I'm not across. I know there's a new Indonesian coach come in, and Davis, I think. So yeah. I'm sure he will add a level of quality around that the coaching piece. So look, I think everybody's situation's different. I think if you have a good association, and this is a generic question, say that are building those pathways and systems in place. I don't think an association can do everything. Especially without the financial support, and definitely I think Badminton Ireland wouldn't have enough money to do everything it would like.
Yeah.
So I think an association is there to help, to support an athlete, to build those pathways and transitions, to join things up. But ultimately, the player themselves is always going to have to have that mindset and connect dots.
Yeah.
So, for example, with another hat on with Badminton Europe, we developed that European Training Centre to really offer that type of capacity. So, for example, if you have a world-class player, they can train in their home base with their coach and sparring. And even if it's just for 1 or 2 weeks, can come and get that sparring in Denmark. And for some other players, it might be longer. But we've got the same concept there where it isn't black and white. It's really trying to add another layer of coaching opportunity or sparring to players. So, you got Jeroen van Dijk, 2 very good Danish coaches, Previously, we had Judith Mullendijk. So, some, again, quality coaches. The same concept is really when you're running a national program at a national center, you're trying to help the player. But ultimately, if they get to that world-class level, then they need to be playing other top 10 in the world players. So it gets complicated the better you get, shall we say.
Yeah. Mark?
Can I step in? Yeah, John, that's brilliant answers, Richard. I find it fascinating to listen and learn from people around the world. It's just fascinating to listen to you. At your time, in my opinion, at your time in Badminton Ireland, you were really hardworking and you set up some fantastic structures in your 4-year period. The piece obviously I'm a badminton coach. I love the work that you did setting up sort of the coach education system. I'm a big supporter of that, and I think that is still going very well in Badminton Ireland, and we're getting a lot of people through the coaching system, which is great in the long run for badminton. It's brilliant. And also, actually, the other bit I really love, I'm really a big club supporter, grassroots supporter. And just before COVID really just got kicked off, about a year or two before, there was an international organised for sort of grade C or grade E or grade G players to represent Ireland, to play against sort of equivalent standards in England and Scotland. And I thought that was a fantastic structure to set up, and I hope that continues when we come out of COVID. That's just a couple of my opinions on your time. So really good.
I have to say, sorry, Richard, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and that's the thing, I think, with some of those items, you don't have huge budgets, so you're having to be very innovative. So with the coach education piece, we've kind of worked with the World Federation to pilot their system. And one of the reasons was we had no funding to be able to rewrite it ourselves. So you're trying to find ways of getting quality products by partnering and networking. And we actually got paid to deliver that in the end, which was even better.
Wow.
So that type of thing is good. And even the graded piece, I can remember about 2 years into the role there, we were talking to England about setting up that graded international type of system and match. Again, that was a big driver of Ronan's. And it's great to see that happening last year, because these things take a long time to kind of happen. Even the Blanchardstown site, I was probably talking to them about a national centre and having badminton courts there probably a year in to when I started.
Wow. And
I think we relocated about 3 years in. So some of these, they've been on the discussion board and trying to advocate and lobby for a long time. So it's been great to see them happening, and obviously after I left, Ronan continued that, and Michael Watt, and now David. So I think that continuity and that work's really been a big positive in getting these kind of goals happening now as well.
Yeah, I have to say, Richard, there's it's a far cry from what we've heard over the years. We remember the household name of the McGees training in a one-court hole, and I do recall even hearing someone tell me Scott Evans used to go into Whitehall Road and try to get in there at 6 a.m. or 5:30 to train with no heat system or anything. When we look back, we've come a long way, relatively speaking.
No, exactly, and I think all of those athletes, as I said, they've all had their challenges and kind of overcome them and gone abroad to find the training, so trailblazing as such in terms of trying to find that pathway, which didn't maybe exist. And that's one of the reasons why we try to put these pathways in place for future generations and, at least make it a little bit easier. But I think athletes always have to have that, winning mindset, ability to control their own fate and put the hard work in themselves as well.
Right.
Yeah, Richard, I have to say I agree with you there. I mean, it's great having structures and having good, positive national governing bodies, but ultimately, if you're going to succeed and go to the very highest levels, the athlete has to drive a lot of themselves. It's got to come from within themselves, I believe. They're just spending a long time around badminton. You just notice the drive and determination of top athletes like yourself, like Scott Evans, like Chloe McGee. They're just very focused and as you say, have a very clear vision of what they want to achieve.
Yeah. I think we all know that the attrition rate of young juveniles in lots of sports tends to be when they go into the dreaded teens, and it tends to show, where are the tough mindset players that have that perseverance, that training. And I think, Richard, I'd also make this point, be interested to see, would you agree with it? COVID is going to really test those players out. When the courts open up, they're not opened in most countries except for the carded athletes and the high performance. How many of our juveniles will we see back in those on those courts?
Yeah, look, I think that's a concern for most sports, shall we say, and I think it'll be a big impact afterwards. And look, you'd hope governments will have some funding to invest in terms of trying to bridge and close that gap as well. So in terms of the higher end, again, that mindset piece is pretty critical, because even now with the Thailand events and other events coming up, and I'm sure the Olympics, there's quarantining, and it's no fun to be staying in a hotel room for probably up to 9 weeks with the odd break on a badminton court. So you got to have that right mindset to be able to handle that. Because it can be tough, and you've got to know why you're doing there and why you're there, and have that focus. And look, sometimes I think as well, that focus can be misinterpreted on the other side as well. So you do get players, and I was probably coined myself, and I've seen a number of players I've worked with as an administrator. They've been coined as hard work or very difficult. And I think there's a misconception and not understanding that mindset and what it takes to win. So a good example is a player in the squash, David Palmer. So he's several times world champion, won the Commonwealth Games for us on the Gold Coast a couple of years ago. He was great to work with. You just have to understand that he was there to win gold medals, and he would do what he can to help within the bandwidth of winning a gold medal. And in fairness, no issue with him at all. But if at the front of his mind, it's to win that medal, and he was inspirational to watch and work with, and now he's a head coach at Cornell in the US, at one of the main uni programs. So I think as well, it's been very helpful for me as an administrator, kind of understanding that mindset, and hopefully I've been able to communicate back to players, I guess what the association needs and why we need to do some things, be it budget reduction or the wider badminton community, and engaging them in that kind of bigger picture, shall we say?
John. Richard, brilliant. I think what also comes across very clearly from this interview, or what I'm taking away from it, is having this winning mindset as an athlete means that you have very strong transferable skills after your athletic days. And I think I'm a big believer in education, and I would really encourage all our young players, even while they're full-time athletes, is almost to be part-time in education, making sure you're covering your education. So when you do, say, get to early 30s, or when you have to retire from sport, that you can take those skills that you've learned in sport and transfer them into the business world and make a great success there. I think those skills are very transferable.
Yeah, definitely. And always encourage the players to study as much as they can. And look, it can be difficult when, with the traveling and the volume of work, and every country's got a different education system and flexibility, but slowly the world is changing to understand that it does need to be more flexible. And Denmark, again, I hate crediting Denmark all the time, but they don't mind. Sorry. excellent education system for a long time. So a lot of the players older than me are doctors and have really good positions now because they were able to really start their career pathway when they were playing. They didn't finish, but they were able to progress that. Where I think it's fair to say, Mark, if you wanted to be a doctor when you were playing and you wanted to play full time, they weren't really compatible, shall we say? So you had to make some harder choices.
That's true, Richard. Yeah, I do. It is good to see the education universities becoming more flexible and sort of modularizing their courses and maybe allowing you to do a degree over, 6, 7, 8 years rather than, let's say, the traditional 3 or 4. And that's what I think top full-time athletes need, that support from the education sector.
And look, the other bit I'd just throw in is, all players are going to get injured or ill at some point.
That's true.
It's really good to have that away. So if you are out for a year, which happens to a lot of players, you can study, you've got something to fill that gap. Because I had 2 hip surgeries when I was playing, where I was out for over a year both times. And one of them kind of helped finish my career, shall we say, early. And you need to have something else to be doing when those type of things happen. So it's actually I see it as more as a positive than a negative.
Yeah, there's a nice theme to that. Dr. Topping. How about that, Mark? Dr. Topping is. there's
no interest in medicine.
I think the one thing, Richard, you mentioned is, and it's a we've all become familiar with this in COVID, is blended learning. And as you said, once you have an internet connection and a computer, you can learn anything you wish. And I can imagine all the hours you would spend in between tournaments and in between, a physical day. You can't pack enough into a physical day. You need rest. The way of learning now has opened up where you can have, as you said, keep an eye on your career in terms of after you go into retirement in your early mid-30s, and also have a full-fledgling playing professional badminton career.
Yeah, and look, you're seeing it more and more, that flexibility, and I think it helps kind of create that winning mindset, that champion mindset as well, with being able to juggle and have an active mind away from the court. You've obviously got to prioritize the training and get the priorities right, but look, there's a lot of really good athletes I've seen now that are in the IOC or in many senior roles, and they're multiple world champions or Olympic champions, and you can always find time. And I'm probably the biggest culprit of saying I don't have enough time, but there's always some time to be able to fit these things if you're driven and you've got that vision, and you've got your reason for doing it. There's always time, and like I said, I've seen so many positive examples.
Yeah, well, Richard, I mean, you're a testament to that theme, a winning mindset for sure. I mean, all you have to do is look at your resume and CV, and my goodness, you would think you've already lived 100 years with what you've packed into a very short 4 decades. So moving just on then to kind of towards the back end of this wonderful insight by Richard Vaughan, top 10 world player in badminton and reached the height of number 7. And Richard, what's next for you? Like, do you miss? I got to throw it in 2 ways. What's next for you, and do you miss Ireland? Would you ever come back here in the future if there was an opportunity, or oh no, it's just too cold?
Well, no, I can manage the cold. It's the rain, so you don't have as much rain as Wales. So you're better than Wales, I think.
Okay, great, that's good.
Look, I'd love to come back one day, and I had a really good relationship with the Institute Sport Ireland, which was positive, and just going around different countries, they were very constructive, and I found them really good to work with, and they were doing some good things. Just probably didn't have the volume, budget, and resource. But we'll look how things go, and I stay in touch with Dan and David, who are doing a great job, and Michael as well. Obviously, is the new chair. So I'm happy to help where I can, be it through Badminton Europe. And I guess for me at the moment, I've got a number of non-executive director roles and consulting.
Yeah, you're busy. You're busy man.
Yeah, so multiple sports, using all my skills through equestrian and artistic swimming and badminton Europe. But it's been really good to kind of get a different mindset, different view on different sports. Equestrian's more of an industry, really, rather than the sport. And get freshen up and see where I go next in the next couple of months. Really.
There could be. Mark's always talking to me about this sport of paddle. What about becoming the top brass in paddle in Ireland, Richard? Have you heard of that? Or in the world, paddle, this amazing sport. Would that interest you?
No, very good, very good. I've seen that tennis is generally sucking up paddle to within its structure, should we say?
Okay.
So paddle, they've been very clever. Yeah, strategically, they've been trying to take a bit of ownership with paddle, which is good for paddle as well, because obviously it gives them the funding and the infrastructure. Yeah. So it's interesting to see sports kind of boost. And I obviously working in squash, which was really good and is a great sport, but it has declined significantly. So that's been really good and a bit of a lesson for badminton, really, that how important it is to make sure the sports is in as good a shape as it can be. The Olympics, good governance is essential, and constantly trying to improve structures to make the sport better. I think it's fair to say that I can honestly say through my work, I've only ever made the best decision for badminton and the sport. I'm not overly political, so and squash is a great example of what can happen to a sport if it doesn't change with the times, really. Yes. Because it is a great sport and it's got so many positive assets, but it's non-Olympic now and really struggling. And paddle's another kind of sport coming through, doing all the right things.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely, and it comes back to doing the right things, the vision, the grassroots. Well, listen, Mark. I think it's we're running out of time on this podcast. We've overstepped our mark with Richard way beyond we would. So just to kind of summarize, is a winning mindset. What is there a secret or none? Well, it's possible. Richard Vaughan has told us it is possible for everyone to have a winning mindset. It's not necessarily no secret, but it is up to you. It's up to you, the individual. And if you have a winning mindset, it will come through not just in your badminton playing days, whether it's at local level or senior level or international level, but also post your playing career. Mark, you want to throw in a final word to Richard, and we'll wrap up this podcast.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Richard, all I want to say, just a huge thank you for coming on to the podcast. It's just fascinating to listen to people and with great experience. And thank you.
No, thank you. It's been great to have a chat. And like I said, I keep in touch on how things are developing, and it's really positive to see the young players coming through, and things like the interstate and the graded international matches and the para development. So I just hope everybody keeps up the good work.
Yeah, Richard, again, thank you so much. It was wonderful to talk to you. Perhaps we might do a profile on Richard Vaughan at some stage, because I'm sure our listeners would be very interested to know all about your DNA in badminton itself. When I look back and see it on Wikipedia and on a lot of the YouTube channel, it's fascinating what you've done and how many medals you've accumulated. I think the story of Richard Vaughan needs to be told. So there you go, Richard. Maybe we can do that on another podcast.
Sounds good.
Okay, signing out. See you, Richard. See you, Mark. All the best.
See you, John. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. And there we have to say goodbye to Richard Vaughan. And we're out of time. Finding time, Richard said, finding time is what it's all about, but we are out of time. Mark, how about that for a Badminton Talk podcast?
Isn't it brilliant just to listen and learn? Fascinating to hear different points of view and get some debate going, John. I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, getting that debate going. And it was very interesting to hear Richard saying, you know, organisations, we have to change with the times. That's a big takeout from this podcast, Mark.
Yeah, well, I suppose squash is a case study that is a sport that has declined. And perhaps badminton needs to modernise to make sure we don't go the same way as squash.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think COVID has probably allowed a lot of us reflect on our various sports, and those of you in the badminton category. Yeah, we hope to see that back on track. But Richard, again, fantastic. I take the big takes out, problem solvers is what makes some great badminton players that have vision. They find ways to succeed, ways to cope. They take on information, and it's a great springboard for the future. So, that's it, Mark. Yeah, see you, Mark. Thanks for tuning in. Next week, we bring on the legendary Ray Stevens. Excited, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, until next week, 11 a.m. See you then.